Oh, I want to welcome you to Wellsburg and to our museum. I'm so glad that you chose to come here. I understand this is your third day of presentations?
Yeah.
God bless you. Okay, our first gentleman is Joseph Vater. He's from Pittsburgh area. He came from a large family, and he was born in 1917. He is in the middle of this picture. He was the second oldest child. His father worked for a painting company, but he was being raised during Depression times and the businesses were going in and out. He also worked with his father doing sandpapering and puttying and little things that a child could do. And he also worked as a paper boy, but he eventually joined the same company as his father, and he got laid off, and then he went to work for his uncle. His father's in the middle of this picture. His name is John, and beside him I'm very bad at left and right. Help me out. Right is Adam, who owned the painting company. He was drafted. He did not enlist. He was drafted on June 21st, 1941, arriving at boot camp in Virginia. He trained in engineering. And he went on a ship to the Philippines. They all left from San Francisco over to Manila, and he arrived after 19 days, October 4th to October 23rd. He joined the engineering battalion in A Company, and they built airstrips at O'Donnell, San Jose, and Irani, constructing revetments. And if you may be better at military terms than I am, I found out that's like a barricade that they would, to protect the men from being hit by shrapnel. After the bombing of Pearl Harbor, his company repaired bridges and roads. He got his first practice shooting at the Japanese. They only trained for 1 day in rifle practice. So I think they were just joking around there, but that's... Okay, the island he went to... Can we use this thing if it works? The island he went to is... There's the main island of the Philippines over there to your right.
Behind you, folks.
Behind you, there's a map. There's a real map.
For those in the front row there.
That's the Philippines, and that's the main island. There was a little tiny island that's so small I can't even point to it. It was called Corregidor, and they called it the tadpole. I think you can see why. So he worked on an airstrip runway, and I believe that the one that he worked on was over to this right. And after the Bataan was surrendered first, that was the island in the west corner of the Philippines, and they surrendered there first. And then once they surrendered that island, they bombed this island. And they bombed it relentlessly. You could hardly walk 20 yards without having a mortar hole there. And he got hit with a grenade, and 10 or 15 years later, the shrapnel came out of his arm. Which I didn't realize that happened, but I guess it does. I don't have a picture of this. I have never been able to find a picture of this cement slab that they were all rounded up. It was called the 92nd Garage Area. And then they were taken by boat up to Manila, the capital of the Philippines, and they were forced to march in the March of Shame down Dewey Boulevard. And the Japanese thought the Philippines might go there, the Filipino people might join them because of their same coloring and background. But the Filipinos were very strong American supporters, because at this time the Philippines were under American rule. He then went to a place called Bilibid Prison. All the people from Corregidor went through this Bilibid prison. And they went to a POW camp called Bataan. They had no food in this camp. They could not get any medicine. And the death rate was very high, 2,400 in I think it was the first 6 months there. So he kept this attitude that he was going to make it out. And he slipped to 84 pounds at one point. And Joe Voter was a very tall man. He was well over 6 feet. So for him to go down that far was really stressful on his body. And from what I've read, the men that weighed more actually lost their lives more than the thinner men. But this shows a picture. This is a picture from the next gentleman we're going to talk about that he sketched, showing one of the men being taken out to the cemetery. And you can see how thin he portrays him. Joe went to the Philippines on a house ship called the Datura Maru. And in the next room you can see a picture of that, an artistic rendition of that ship. And he went to work in Mukden, Manchuria, which is now China. As they were going over, a sailor could see the torpedoes. There were 2 torpedoes that went past their ship. They then went to Formosa, which is now Taiwan, and they continued on the ship to Japan. Now, you'll hear about these ships over and over in this story with these men. They almost, all but the sickest went over to Japan to work, to make military things for the Japanese people. And on these ships, they just packed them in like sardines. And when they left, you know, it would be 120 degrees inside these ships. No air, very little water, and very little food. So these men were coming from the tropics, which, you know, goes up to 100 degrees. And now they're going to 40 below. Because that's very close to Siberia, I understand. There is a formal name for this factory, but I'm just going to call it the MKK factory. And when they got to that factory, they looked inside at the machinery in the factory, and they saw the company name Ford. In other words, America made some of the machinery in that building. The men walked. This picture was taken by Joseph Vater, and you'll learn about how he was able to take these pictures. They walked 5 miles to work, worked 12 hours a day. They had 1 day off a month. And it was very difficult for the men because they were having to make machinery that they knew was going to be used against their own country. So they tried to sabotage the work they were doing. They would drop tools in the vats or make faulty equipment. I read one story where they were told to make uniforms, and they made it so the buttons would all fall off. And then right after they got out of the war, they were issued those uniforms. So by December 1944, the Americans were sending over B-29 airplanes. Now, Joe did not take this picture. It's an aerial view of when his camp area was bombed. And it killed 16 to 18, I don't know why it says 16 to 18, but I guess they don't know the exact amount, and injured 40 or 50. These B-29 airplanes that went over to Japan did more damage to the land there and to the people than the atomic bombs, which a lot of people don't realize. Okay, this is the story of how he got his camera. When the Russians came to liberate them, there were airmen from the B-29s, and Joe traded his sword for a camera. And he took 13 rolls of film, and every single picture came out. And the camera is in the next room. You'll see the camera, and he has the photograph album of all the pictures he took. And we have put some of these up on our website, and we need to finish there were 200 pictures in that album. Plus he brought back money from almost every country.
The time frame was 44 then, or no?
They got rescued, I believe,
45.
August, September, you know, depending on different units got rescued at different times. He has taken art classes at the Art Institute of Pittsburgh. And in the painting company, he went back to work for the painting company, his uncle's painting company, and he did specialized work, marbleizing, gold leaf, that sort of work. This shows a watercolor that he did for the Art Institute, which was used as a promotional postcard by the school. He married, he met Helen before the war, and for some reason she collected stories. I guess she remembered him, and she collected newspaper articles about him while he was over, you know, things going on in the war. So when he came back, he started going out with her again, and they got married. Had 3 children, but he built his own house. You can see him there on the roof of this house. This is in Pittsburgh. And that stone, you know, they cut it all, he cut it all himself with some help of some of his buddies. While he was working, he did all this work on the side, and he was able to get, because they worked in this painting company, I think they were able to buy things from old homes that were maybe being torn down. So, pretty nice house. Joe's son, Joe Jr., he's now president of the organization, this Descendants Memorial Society group. And the grandsons of Joe helped him write this little book. It's over here. His items are to the left here. I did each artist that we're going to talk about. Each has a little table with some of their items. And this book is online. If you would want to read his entire story, you can read it. He became commander of this organization that I've been telling you about, these Defenders of Bataan and Corregidor, from 1953 until 1955, and he was editor for years and years, decades. And as a result of doing this newsletter, people sent him clippings and pictures, photos, articles, and he's donated many, many things to this museum. That's a picture of the newsletter. This newsletter now, we've taken it over here in Wellsburg. There's a little paper down the street a ways and up one street, and we do it now. This is one of the pictures he took with his camera. It's the Philippines. And here's his watercolor. This watercolor is out in the other room out there, where most of our collection is. And if you look out the door, there's a picture, oh wait, wrong one, I'm sorry. This picture is an actual picture of the Bataan Death March from the Air Force Museum, or National Museum of the Air Force. And here's his rendition of it. You notice how, I've noticed with all of Joe's pictures, he always has some color. I mean, that was a dreary thing, but you notice the gentleman in white. This was Mount Samat Cross in the Philippines, and that was the last battle against the Japanese, and they constructed this cross in the Philippines to memorialize the men. Here's Joe. You know, he had painted this, and that's a picture of him with the cross, and that picture is out in the hall there. You can see that on your way out that way. He also did some stained glass windows for a church up in Butler, Pennsylvania. And if you look on the right side, there's a picture of the logo of the Kwan. So that's our first gentleman, Joseph Vater. And like I said, you can see these pictures going down the hall and in the other room. Our next gentleman is an artist, is not an artist, he is an artist.